let's get started. So who here has ever been sitting for a period of time? Maybe driving in a car, sitting on the couch, and while you've been in that seated position, all of a sudden you just kind of feel this need or this necessity to move your body. Maybe it's to lift your shoulders, you start to move your head back and forth. You just have to twist a little for that spot in your back to crack just right, like it always does, right? Maybe you got to extend your legs all the way out. So here's the deal. That is literally the pain in stillness. Okay, I think we've all experienced that at some point in time. I think we all have. And these issues, like I said, they compound over time. And if they're not offset with movement, we're going to start to have some issues. So let's talk about what to expect. Okay. So on your piece of paper that you're taking notes on, because I'm going to go over a lot of things, I just want you to write down these 5 words. The first is sitting. And leave a little space in between each line just so you can take some notes. Okay. This is kind of like our outline for tonight. Okay, so the issue is sitting. Okay, so that's what we're going to be talking about. Our lives are sedentary and we sit more than we are designed to. And one of the joints that is adversely affected by all of the sitting is the hip joint. And we're going to dive in just a little bit below the surface to understand your hips just a little more fully tonight. Don't worry, I'm not going to get into a whole bunch of jargon and medical terms because I don't want to overwhelm anybody, but we're going to dig in just a little bit, right? Because I think it's helpful to know kind of what's going on inside there so that you can kind of help keep it healthy. And we'll talk more about that. We're going to be talking about the psoas muscle that begins with a P. The psoas is the muscle we're going to become a little bit more familiar with because I always like to give you a muscle and a move, okay? So this muscle is it's really incredible and it does a lot of really cool things, but it also suffers from prolonged sitting. Another common thing that gets thrown around a lot is sciatica pain. Okay, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about that because having sciatica, sometimes this is affected by sitting, the hip issues with the psoas, right? So sciatica is something we're going to be talking about. Essentially, this is a back issue, but sitting only adds insult to injury. And then lastly, what we're going to be talking about is just exactly what your hips are responsible for, and that is hip hinging. And it's something that we do on a day-to-day basis, sometimes thousands of times a day. So just make sure you've got these words. And like I said, I'm going to share a lot of information, and this is just going to help simplify it. So let's move on. So hands up, who works from home here? Just so I can kind of get an idea. So who works from home? Or if you don't work from home, who sits for the majority of your job? Okay, so if for your job, the majority of what you're doing is kind of in a seated position. Awesome. Okay, all right. So that's good to know. Good to know. So unfortunately, this is the world that we find ourselves in today, right? And I think it's interesting because most people understand the benefits of movement and just how important it is. But no one's really looking at the nasty side effects of sitting, right? No one's really like discussing that. Everybody's like, everybody's, oh, Crystal, I got my 10,000 in, and they're so proud. And that's awesome, right? And I love all the technology in today's day and age in this world because it helps get people more mobile, right? It's getting people to move and engage. Everybody's obsessed with counting steps. And that's, like I said, that's great. But what we want to make sure is that we also understand that in addition to getting our steps in, for the health of our body, it's important to move it in certain dynamic ways, kind of in these restorative movement ways that we have you doing here in this program. And what it's going to do is that although, steps are great, but this series of exercises that we're doing has been shown to increase your mobility and your flexibility to decrease the risks of aging, okay? Risks like falling, okay? And I'm sure you probably heard in past presentations that I've given, the person who has done these restorative movements and strength trained their whole life, and then the person who is not, they both fall and break either their pelvis or their hip. One returns to the life that they knew, one does not, okay? That life significantly changes for that person. And I don't know about you, but the world right now, if you're in New England, is a little icy. And some of us, I've heard a lot of people have fallen, right? Just because of so much ice. And some people have broken bones while others have not. This is also why we practice balance year round in our circuits. Because if it's not ice this time of year, it's being out on the water, whether you're out on the boat or you're out kayaking, right? Or maybe you're on uneven ground to begin with and you like to go hiking. But training for these extracurricular activities is really important. And the reason I'm so passionate about this is because I see so many people living with limitations due to lack of movement or strength. It's one of the two. And two things, by the way, that most people have control over. But people have given up thinking that they'd ever go paddleboarding or they'd ever go kayaking again, or that they'd ever get the chance to go hiking. And it's almost like because of this lack of movement and this lack of mobility, they've given up on adventure. And it's sad, but it's true. And I want people to be able to take back their sense of adventure. That's my passion as a personal trainer, is I've seen so many people go from, I can't physically do that, to look at me go. And it is the most incredible, empowering thing that I get the pleasure of watching, and to be able to give that gift back to somebody. But like Tony's saying, you can't give that gift to somebody who doesn't believe that it's possible. So think about this. If you follow, regardless of what you believe, if you follow evolution kind of back, way back to before wagons anyway, how did people used to get around? We are literally called pedestrians, the root word ped, meaning going on or performing on foot. We traveled by foot, people, and we walked for thousands of miles, not all at once. This was broken up, right? Because we're humans, but we've traveled for thousands of miles for food, water, and other resources, right? So movement is life, okay? Like I said, regardless of what you believe and how we got here, we were designed to move. Our bodies are constructed for it, with over 360 joints and 700 skeletal muscles that allow and encourage us to move. Our circulatory system, like that real system Tony was just talking about, literally requires movement. So do our bowels, right? These functions require movement to function properly. And historians have shown us that as a species, as we've evolved, we've learned to use tools and make fire. We're incredibly resourceful and super intelligent. However, we have evolved to make our world so convenient that we don't even have to get a pen and a piece of paper to make a grocery list. You can just ask Alexa or Siri and say, add kale to my shopping list. The human body just isn't designed for sedentary activity. And yet it's the thing that lots of us are doing the most. So let's talk about your hips. Okay, so I really encourage you to think about your own body that you are currently in throughout this presentation as we kind of continue here. So one thing that I hear a lot is, Crystal, I don't know what happened. And I say, what do you mean? And I just heard the story the other day. Well, it was just last year. I was able to go walk all the way out to the woodshed, uphill both ways, carry a huge load up 2 flights of stairs and unload it. And this year, I really struggled with that trip. All of a sudden, I'm feeling bloated. I'm feeling tired most of the time. My strength is gone and I don't know what happened. But I hate to break it to you, it wasn't all of a sudden. This is something that has been happening subtly in small doses over time, right? Nobody just gets out of bed and twists their knee the wrong way and just tears their ACL. That just doesn't happen. These are symptoms that have been creeping up that people have been ignoring for a long time, right? And just pushing it off and pushing it off, chalking it up to maybe aging, because that's, everybody loves to do that. Oh, well, I'm getting old. It just must be insert X, whatever it is, right? But what we're talking about here tonight is magic. It is literally talking about rewinding the clock. The human body is an incredible machine. So like I said, I hate to break it to you, it wasn't all of a sudden. We are a direct result of all the decisions we have made. And I tell you what, it's just that all of a sudden you're starting to notice it. So surrounding your hips, if we look at this diagram, and the body, like I said, it's this incredibly intricate. There's so many, different muscles and different bones, and it can be really overwhelming to understand, right? But if you look at this pulley system that's right to the right of this picture over here, your hip and your knee are like these pulleys over here. And the muscles are like the ropes in between that push and pull, right? That make it so that you can walk forward and back, kick, jump, whatever it is that you like to do. Okay, sit down, stand up, bend over. And what happens here is that if there is something, right, like if this muscle is stronger than the one in the front, vice versa, if this muscle is tighter than the one in the front, even just a little bit over time, it really starts to pull things out of whack. Okay. And when you start to pull things out of whack just a little bit, think about your car, right? You're out of alignment just a couple of degrees, and then all of a sudden, what happens? A month or so later, you need new rotors. A month or so after that, you need new brake pads, right? The system is starting to wear unevenly. Okay, because things are out of whack. How many people here see a chiropractor right now? Anybody? Gotcha. Awesome. Awesome. They're really great for putting you back together. But we want to take it a step further. These restorative movements that you're doing are helping to set the money that you're spending at the chiropractor is being set and kept in place by the restorative movements, right? So let's honor those. So that's just kind of in a nutshell, like I said, to just be aware that if one thing is kind of out of whack or stronger than the other, if you out train or always stand on one hip more so than the other, these things start to affect long term, right? And then what happens? All of a sudden, Crystal, right? So like I said, think about your own body as I'm kind of talking about some of these things. Feel free to reach down and to touch. I'll coach you to touch a couple of different areas on your hip bones to kind of be aware, because the more you can kind of look inward at this thing and be like, hey, what's going on in here? The more you can help treat it. Okay. All right, let's see. So extended sitting starts to shorten all of these things and really get them out of whack. So let's see, sitting at a desk is really not great. It can be harmful. An analysis actually of 13 studies of sitting time and activity levels found that those who sat for more than 8 hours a day with zero physical activity, we're talking zero physical activity in a day, had a risk of dying similar to the risks of those posed by obesity and smoking, just from sitting 8 hours a day and not exercising. Another study, this holds promise. Another study from more than 1 million people found that 60 to 75 minutes of moderately intense physical activity a day countered the effects of too much sitting. So what this means is that even if you have a sedentary job where you sit, that requires you maybe 8 hours a day of just pure sitting, exercising can negate some of the negative effects of the job. Okay. And it's just, this stuff is just really cool to be able to understand. So let's see what's next. So we want to understand the hips. So the joint that is affected, right? We've got lots of joints. So if you look at my lovely skeleton right here, let me come back to you. So my skeleton right here. So there's lots of joints in the body, as you can see. He's also working on the computer diligently, but he needs a stand-up desk. So the shoulder joint, the neck, right? Obviously, we can see that that's going to take some brunt of sitting as well. But tonight, we're focused down here. Okay, so understanding your hips. And people that I work with, oftentimes, what we're trying to do is combat sitting, right? The sedentary lifestyle that we find ourselves in. And I want to show you here on the slide just what happens. So there's a few common issues that happen with the hip. First, I just want you to take a look at this diagram. Oh, I'm going back one. So this diagram right here, the psoas, okay? So just look at the skeletal structure, right? So we got the ribs, and you can feel right in the front, right below your chest, you've got your ribs, right? The one piece that goes down the middle, we've got your spine. There's a little section down here. This is called your sacrum. You don't have to remember what it's called, but this is the piece that when your chiropractor adjusts, they usually start down here. And we usually start with people, just like this program, we start people with working on and understanding hip movement, right? It's the center of the body. Everything that kind of goes wrong with the body starts here and trickles either up or down. That's why oftentimes when your chiropractor starts, where do they start? Your hip. Okay. And so this right here is the sacrum. And then down here, we've got your femur bone. Okay. So this is the psoas right here, and it connects up here at your spine, and it comes all the way down and connects into the back side of your femur right there, kind of like right there tucked in the back. And you can see where if this gets swollen or cranky or upset, there is not much space in between this little teeny area that it slides. Okay. There's not much space there. And what happens, like if you look at this guy over here sitting, it starts to shorten. And what that literally does is it takes the pelvis and it pulls it out of alignment. Okay. And it starts to tilt, right? So if you put your hands on your hips, it starts to take your hip bones and tilt them forward. Okay. So your belly starts to come forward, right? And with years of this being out of whack, it really starts to throw off the body. And so either it's hip pain or low back pain. And again, it can be caused by many things. It might not just be the psoas, but I like to give you, again, a muscle and a move. So like I said, it's really complex, but to just understand that it's important to move this part of your body. I've seen a few people who are past the point of restoration and do require surgery for certain things. And yes, I understand that surgery is sometimes necessary, but if you follow some of these issues that led to surgery back far enough, oftentimes you can find a place where things could have been avoided and a turn could have been taken to avoid that, right? And I see so many people just accept pain. And I understand pain is a facet of life, right? And it's a really good tool to help learn things. But people just accepting their pain and they hold on to it almost like it's this new description of themselves. Okay. And with the help of a professional and asking the right questions, you can really get some awesome answers and some solutions to a lot of these problems. And I've really seen people literally change their physiology from doing these restorative movements. And what we're talking about here is from contemplating back or bladder surgery to restoring and managing without. Like I said, I understand surgery is sometimes necessary, but if you can avoid it, let's try that, right? I've heard professionals say, well, we've exhausted all of your options. I've literally heard physicians say that to people. And what that does is that takes away people's hope. And I find it so unfortunate that is kind of the world we live in, when really it's not that we've exhausted all your options. We've exhausted all the options that you know of, right? So let's take back that control. All right, so that's a little bit about the psoas. And like I said, this little guy over here, we want to avoid winding up like him, because that's what's happened, is that this has just gotten so shortened from sitting over in an uncomfortable and terrible position for so long that he just can't stand back up. Okay, all can be avoided. So next, I want to talk about sciatica. Okay, so this is just the back side of the body, and this is the side. So over here is the belly, and this is your back. Okay, again, we don't need to necessarily know the terms. We're just looking at pictures here. So sciatica pain, it refers to the pain that radiates along the path of your sciatic nerve, which branches from your lower back, and it goes down through the hip. And like I said earlier, you don't need to be a doctor or a scientist or a personal trainer to learn more about your body. My goal with this is that you just understand this. Right here, where the spine is on the person on the right, if you look at her spine, right? Picture the spine is like a power cord, right? This power strip that your computer is probably plugged into. So you've got this power strip and you've got this cord plugged into it. And all of these cords come out in these different spots, and they all bundle together. And they go down through the sciatic nerve, and then they branch off into different spots down the leg. And they give you different receptive feedback that tell you different things. Now, you can imagine now from what I've told you, if this is the back right where that psoas connects, right here in the back of the spine. And you can imagine if that's tight or weak from sitting, it can literally start to pull things, meaning your skeletal structure, out of whack. Okay, so if muscles in your body are tight, it will start to pull your skeletal structure out of whack. Okay. Weakness can also do this, right? But this is the other piece of it that people don't quite realize sometimes. So we've got this beautiful power cord with this very intricate system that runs down the side of the body. And again, it's just helpful knowledge when you're doing these dead bugs and these pelvic tilts, why you are doing them. It strengthens this area and all of those small, teeny, tiny stability muscles in your back and pelvic floor. Remember, we looked at this in this picture of the psoas earlier. Look at how intricate that is, where the psoas, everything connects in there. That's like the roads down in Boston, okay? It's intricate. There's a lot of stuff that can go wrong in there. But you don't need to be a doctor or a scientist or personal trainer to learn more about your body. My goal with this slide, again, is not to overwhelm you, but to just simply show you that these nerves plug into one spot and travel down the leg. And then, knowing this when you're doing your restorative movements, and understand if you're skipping them, what you're really skipping. Because this type of restoration, it does something completely different for your body than strength training does. Both are beneficial, yes, but they are different. So if your muscles are tight, what could we also do to help loosen them up? Foam rolling. Foam rolling. Yes, Pearl, I can see you mouthing it. She's like, yes, foam rolling. So picture this. So forget about the psoas for a second. There's a million muscles down here. We just looked at it. All of these muscles down here, if they're tight, what are they pulling on? They're pulling on other muscles that are connected to other bones, right? And like, your backbone's literally, if you follow it up far enough, it's literally connected to your neck. Okay, so understanding how this works is really important. And don't skip your foam rolling and your restorative movements, because they will literally help prevent misalignment. Now, here is the next slide. Has this changed for you guys? It's just a little delayed. Okay, so next I want to talk about, this is the move. Thanks, Pete. So next I want to talk about the move, right? I said I was going to give you a muscle and a move tonight. The muscle I gave you was your psoas, and here we have the move. So we've got a hip hinge versus a squat. Now, you can also do this at home if you have a broom or a Swiffer, whatever. But you can hold this on the back side of your head and the back side of your back, similar to if anyone's ever come here to headquarters for an FMS, you've done something like this. And here's the difference. The squat is an up and down movement. Okay. And in both of these, there's a similarity where you want your head, your shoulders, and your butt touching the dowel. And if you have misalignment, you might not feel one or the other, or some of them not touching. Okay. And that's, again, why we do these restorative movements. But so the squat, right, proper form is touching all 3 points. It's up and down, whereas the hip hinge is back and forth. Excuse me. So, some of us in class were doing the squat. The hip hinge, we call that a Romanian deadlift, or a single leg Romanian deadlift. That might sound familiar to you, right? I see some heads nodding. Awesome. All right. So this is the position that we're talking about. Okay. Just in the single leg version, we're only on one leg, and then we're working balance. But if your hips are not moving properly, it's going to affect the way your whole entire body works. And we do thousands of hip hinges a day, right? We don't always squat down to pick everything up. I mean, imagine what that would look like if every time you drop something on the floor, you squatted down to pick it up. We don't do that. Oftentimes, we just bend over at the waist, right? We bend over at the waist, and you pick up the pen or whatever it is that you drop. That is a hip hinge when you're sending your butt back and standing back up. Okay. And we do these hip hinges in everything, right? So think about when you vacuum. Okay. Think about when you're gardening, when you're picking up the kids. Okay. When you're cleaning up after your dog, taking the clothes out of the front loading dryer or washer, whatever it might be, whichever one's on the bottom. Maybe they both are. I don't know. But my point is, we use the hip hinge thousands of times a day. And this is why it's really important to know what you're doing and why you're doing it. Again, this joint is affected a lot when we sit. It's affected a lot. Okay. So moving on, let's make the connection. So the more we can really understand about how our body works, the better off we are going to be. Okay. So if you take a look at this person who came here to do an FMS, if you look at her, she's doing the hip hinge, she's sending her butt back, and she's doing the toe touch test. But if you look a little closer, you'll see this flat spot on her back. Okay. and she doesn't have any spinal issues, right? Nothing underlying in terms of like scoliosis, stenosis. There's nothing like that here. It's just simply a lack of movement and a lack of which has led to a lack of mobility, right? Lack of movement leads to a lack of mobility, which then starts to really affect your ability to touch your toes. So what I want to encourage you to do is to tune into your body throughout the day and become present just for a few moments, where you put your phone down and you just stand up and listen to what your body's telling you. Unfortunately, we are oftentimes very tuned out from our bodies throughout the day because we're living in either the past or the present in terms of like, what did I do? What do I have to do? That we're not focused on like where we are right now, currently in the middle smack dab of what we're doing. So don't ignore your body. Get down on the floor and stretch out when and where you can. Every little bit of movement adds up. So think about something you've learned to do that you didn't know how to do, like walking or learning to drive a car. You can also learn how to take care of your body by doing research, asking professionals, and attending talks like this. Don't avoid the issues, okay? I see so many times, like I said earlier, people accept the pain. Don't avoid the issues you might be having with your body. If you're feeling pain, please address it. And if your priority is not your body, I mean, come on. Literally, what else have you got? Right? But, unfortunately, some of our society has become like superficial. We're more concerned about like, nice cars or newer things, and it's great to have dreams and to want more. That's really great. And there's really nothing wrong with that, but not at the expense or the cost of your health or your body. Because remember, you can't enjoy the sports car or the yacht if you can't get in and out of it. Okay. So let's talk about some solutions. So if you want to avoid issues like the lack of mobility that we see here on this slide, and I believe my slide's just about to change. Yep, there's just a little delay. So here's a few things to help you take a stand, okay? So take some time to get used to this. Take a break from sitting every 30 minutes and just stand up. Stand while talking on the phone or watching television. If you work at a desk, try a standing desk or improvise with a higher table or counter, okay? Walk with your colleagues or your friends for meetings and gatherings rather than some type of sit-down meeting. Carla's favorite, foam roll. Do those restorative movements, okay? Very, very important. Or work out with us, okay? So those are my solutions. So just in conclusion, I just want to say, back to the 5 words that we had originally written down, is we have, let me see, sitting. It shortens our muscles because we are designed for movement. Okay. The hip is the joint that's affected by sitting. The psoas, sitting makes this muscle shorten. Sciatica is just a fancy way of saying you got a pinched nerve. And lastly, we've got hip hinge. It's the most common activity that we do, and you can keep it healthy with restorative movement. Okay. So that's all I have for this evening. I just want to say, let's take a stand against sitting. So thank you so much, everybody. And I'm going to turn this back over to Miss Perla.